show.
Thank you, Lenny. Pleasure to be on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad to have you on. Really excited to dive into your background and just your family's background. So, I think just to start off, Pat, why don't you just go into, the family's background, your background, and just give us the story.
Sure, absolutely. So I work here at GSI Family Office, which is a multi-generation, multi-family family office based in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. Long story, but it really starts, it really traces back to the late 50s when my grandfather emigrated here, just southern Italy, little opportunity, lived in a very small village just north of the Sicilian island and on the mainland, and came to this country with his father in search of a better life, and fifth grade education, very little resources, got here, and unfortunately his father passed away shortly thereafter. So he was kind of, from a young age, I think he was 15, kind of had to become as the oldest son, had to become to his two other brothers and his mom to be the breadwinner, and kind of they all started working and they're kind of providing for one another and trying to make it in this country. No resources, no language, again, minimal education. So that's really our beginnings here. They came right to Chicago and all the boys, working, probably not legal today. They're probably 14, 13 and ultimately just, they lived a hard life in Chicago and worked a lot of jobs and 7 days a week pretty much. I mean, they were working for the city, they were working at steel plants. My great grandmother, was working at she worked at Salerno butter cookies here in Chicago, and so fast forward, really from the early 60s until the 80s, it was a hard life of many jobs and just scratching and clawing to get by. I think where my grandfather kind of caught his break was they opened a grocery store on the north side of Chicago in the 70s, and they used to pick up and a big part of their draw was at their deli counter, specifically when they were making my great grandmother's Italian sausage recipe. And so they would pick up their raw materials from a local pork slaughterhouse in the former meat market, which is now Sterling Bay and Fulton Market and all these great high rises here in Chicago. But anyways, the grocery store eventually, didn't really do all that well. But the owners of the pork slaughterhouse said, hey, you're buying all these raw materials from us. Why don't you come work here? We have a need to dispose of them. And obviously you have a great product that you're making, and you're starting to really make some inroads with the local consumers. And so ultimately he decided that was the best thing for his future. And he actually, he joined that company and was starting to, he would take their byproducts along with some pork butts and some of the prime cuts. And he started a little food service delivery route with his sausage line. And eventually it grew and grew. He added more lines. He was ahead of his time. He was one of the first grande cheese distributors in this market. He was one of the first Stanislaw distributors in this market. So his imported brands that he was sourcing from Italy, I mean, he really, and he started to, he was making serious money, and it was kind of life-changing for them. And ultimately kind of where I would say the origins of this office and our family, the Greco family enterprise, really started when eventually him and my father, who's the oldest of G2, so my grandparents are obviously G1, my dad is the oldest of 5 in G2, they broke off and started Greco Sons, and the rest is really history from there. That was 1990. Greco Sons is a food service distribution business, was based in Chicago, and we could kind of get into maybe more of the particulars if you want, but that's really our start, and that was the catalyst to our family enterprise, and which is now a much bigger enterprise and spans 3 generations, going on to 4, and hopefully many more in the future. So
Yeah, no, that's awesome, Pat. Really appreciate that background, and really inspiring story. Like you said, came from nothing, and really, I guess in a way wasn't the goal initially, but saw the opportunity and jumped on it. And it speaks to the hustle, and the hard work that it sounds like has kind of been ingrained into the family since the beginning. So want to kind of understand that a little bit more, because obviously your father, seeing or hearing these stories from the beginning, might have also seen an opportunity himself to really break off and expand the operations. So why don't you open that up a little bit on kind of how that evolved from your grandfather and then into the Greco and Sons era?
Yeah, no, great question. So I would say, our family's very entrepreneurial. My grandfather is very entrepreneurial. My dad is the consummate entrepreneur, my uncles, and I think really it came down to, that both of them talking, and saying, hey, we can, this is a viable business. There's a lot of, I think that they saw at the time that it was a very fragmented business, and specifically, I think the market for Italian and pizza was ripe for the taking, especially in the Chicago market, which is obviously a very large market. So I think they recognized that they had something there. They had, kind of a product line that was differentiated from anyone else in the market, and was a very high quality product in the sausage line. And then all the other lines that they had brought in, that my grandfather had brought in, and my uncle Orlando had brought in, that there was a great market opportunity to really grow. And some other companies, lack of succession planning, and they took what I would say differentiated them was their lines, their work ethic, and their ability to really scale that business and reinvest and do it as a family. But I would tell you that the one thing that most people will say about that know our family in this business is that you'll be hard pressed to find people that work harder and that are more dedicated, because working hard means a lot of things. I mean, the hours were crazy. I remember, that's where my dad and I think my uncles and my aunt got their appreciation for work ethic, was watching what my grandfather did, 7 days a week, their whole life. He was never there. We worked night shift, first shift, and then they ran a grocery store all weekend from 3 a.m. till close. And so they saw that. I think that's what instilled in them an appreciation for that kind of grinding and dedication to creating a better life, right? That's really what it boiled down to. But there was a market opportunity that they realized that they could exploit, and they just went to work, and it was, we got to watch it as kids too, right? Because my siblings and I were the oldest of G3, and they founded that business really when we were born, and so we kind of saw the growth and the reinvestment and the long hours, and it's been a beautiful thing to see as a family, because I think what you'll find with us is that a lot of the life lessons that our family members have were learned in the business, really. Which, some family offices, obviously, they take kind of like a different approach. We hire all professional managers and kind of eliminate family from being in the operating companies. We were kind of the opposite, and I would tell you, to this day, it kind of guides our family office and all of our enterprises, real estate, our manufacturing companies, all of our other investments are through the lens of two primary goals and values, which is, one, to keep the family together, and two, to continue to grow and build for the reason of providing other career opportunities for the next generations. Because my grandpa's big thing was I never want anyone in our family, after the hard work that we put in the reinvestment, I never want them to have to be, looking for a way to provide and to put food on their own table. That's why I did what I did, is what he would tell you. So.
Wow, that's incredible. And so with that being said, it sounds like like you mentioned, the operations, seems to really keep the family together. So can you explain that a little bit? I think well, when we first initially spoke, it sounded like there had to be some more formalities kind of embedded in the governance and just, keeping the structure more organized. So how did you guys identify that and implement some of those strategies to be able to know that this is what we need to do to keep this sustainable moving forward?
Yeah, no, good question. It's hard, right? And even I know I'm painting. I mean, we are a very close family, but it's like every other family. Like no one's perfect, and there are difficult times. But the one thing I think that we do a great job of is everyone always kind of keeps things in perspective, and there's a lot of love there, which helps in times of disagreement or where maybe interests or vision aren't aligned. But through a few years back, we kind of formalized our governance structure because we were thinking, hey, everything's great now, and God willing, it'll continue to be great. But as we all know, that the statistics are what they are. I think businesses passed to a fourth generation is like under 3% or 2% or something crazy. I know it's under 3. And so, who are we to think, that we're impervious to those kinds of pressures and situations. So what we did a few years back was saying, hey, let's talk to some of the other great legacy families out there that are in the 4th, 5th, 6th plus generations, and talk to some of these consultants or these law firms that have done some of this work and see what other people have done and how they've done it. And as every family office there's a ton of variability, and so we basically did was we came up with a framework that we thought was going to be most conducive to keeping the family together and keeping the interests compounding together. And so we came up with a uniform board structure, a lender management structure, super majority approvals for kind of big actions, obviously. And this board is, so our main holdings are our investments, our commercial real estate portfolio, which is very large and has been building since the late 90s, and then our cheese manufacturing and processing business. So they're all different, and then there's other stuff, obviously, but those 3 sleeves are majority of what we manage here, and they're all kind of, ownership is kind of similar across the 3 generations. So created one board, lender structure, management fees. We came up with, we put in a redemption package, which is awkward, right? You never want to talk about that, but what we were told was, hey, when you don't have it is when, the idle minds and so we did that. There is a lockup on the illiquid assets and for a certain period, and then we also did, among a number of other things, but another thing we did was we basically set aside a portion of the securities investments that are essentially cash, fixed incomes, equities, alternatives, etc. We basically said, hey, this is going to be kind of to not disrupt the 90% of the liquid assets that have really, that really drive the opportunities that we talked about earlier, and that really have been the key to our success, I would say, is our liquid assets, not liquid assets. But we basically said, hey, over time, you'll vest into this pool, and basically, here's going to be your nest egg. And the thought was, and some other big groups have done this, and we talked to them, and they had said that they had a lot of success with it, well received. And then the other thing we did, to your point, is we put in basically a rule before anyone joins a family business that they would have a certain amount of time to work outside of the family before they came in, which is 2 to 3 years minimum, depending on the opportunity. And the thought there was, it's more so that everyone comes in and kind of appreciates, what we have and the job security and the ability to work with family and to not come in with a sense of entitlement and things like that. And it's been very well received, and we've implemented it, and I did it as well. I worked at a firm called 𝘰𝘪𝘴𝘠𝘪𝘮 in Chicago in M&A, and I will tell you that that was very humbling, and it was, you don't take anything for granted, because you see, hey, if you want to make it, on your own. It's hard. It's not easy. So appreciate, what we have, and let's keep passing it on so that the next generations will benefit from it.
No, that's awesome. That's an interesting concept. And so speaking on yourself, Pat, because it's interesting, I have some family office executives typically on the show. And so you're a family office executive, but you're also a part of the family. So why don't you kind of explain a little bit about your, roles and responsibilities and focus, and, maybe also explain what are some of the challenges of being part of the family, but, having kind of that executive role as well?
Yeah, no, good question. I think, when you look at a lot of family offices and you see that, I'll put the family and executive piece on the side for now, but I think you see a lot of family offices, and I think a lot of their executives, or the primary executive, is kind of like an expert generalist. And so, obviously smaller staff, and you rely on a lot of outside consultants, but you kind of have to know, you got to be, I would say, know more than enough to be dangerous, but you got to have to know when to be resourceful, and when something is, hey, I understand this, I got it. So with my background, I hate talking about myself, but with my background, I was like corporate, M&A, and working in the food companies growing up, and then full time after I left McDermott, both at Greco and now on the cheese side, in addition to the family office, and having done a lot of real estate work throughout my career. So it's kind of like well suited to, and now learning a lot of the limited investment stuff has been a pretty big learning curve, but I like to think that between our consultants and our team here, and maybe my background, that we could kind of manage those primary investment sleeves. On the kind of the second part, being a family member and an executive is obviously kind of it can, there can be a conflict, right? Or there could be, there's emotional things, because listen, it's not all the time that people agree, like, hey, should we do this, this big transaction and tie up all this money? And no, we do things, we're very diligent. There's, we have to hit certain numbers to make an investment, and we have an investment policy statement and the capital allocation strategy. So we're pretty buttoned up from that point in terms of planning and being thoughtful about investments. But, it's not to say that, people always align, and being a family member, it makes it, it can make it a little more emotional. And so it's not to say that it's always easy. I think, again, I go back to kind of what we talked about earlier, which is, I think our family does a great job of always putting everything in perspective and leading with the love part of it. And we're very, very tight knit. And so we work through it, but we do what, we try to be great stewards, and we look out. I think one benefit, like the drawback of maybe some of you're pretty well intertwined with your other shareholders, and so there's that part that could add some complexity. I think the flip side is, having a family member in a leadership role at one of these offices with dealing with the magnitude of dollars is also good, because you're watching everything, and there's, what all the fees are on things. You're watching every banking facility. You're watching all the investments, and making sure that this isn't something that's, maybe not within your scope, or what you're comfortable with, and it's not a fee-driven thing by one of your advisors, which we have great advisors. So I don't mean to say that, but I do think the flip side of that is that you have family there. They're going to really, really care and watch everything, and be hopefully great stewards, which is what we try to do here. So.
Yeah. And so in terms of the entire operation, it's safe to assume that there are non-family members that are in key roles. Is that right?
Of course. Oh yeah. So we have a pretty small office staff here. My dad is our chairman. I serve as our president. We have another G3 working in the office. He's our property manager and really honing in on the real estate. We all wear multiple hats, and it's a very much a team atmosphere. So it's not like we're not big with titles, but obviously you kind of have to have them so people know who they're dealing with. But we have a non-family member that's our CFO. We have a non-family member that's our former CFO. That's kind of in a financial accounting function here. We have an office administrator. We have a construction associate. So we have a number of non-family members. I think what we're starting to do now on the cheese side, now that we have, Cheese Merchants is our legacy business. It's a very large national cheese processing manufacturer here in outside Chicago in Bartlett, Illinois. And then we have 4 other manufacturing divisions, 3 in Wisconsin and 1 in New Jersey. And what we've done there, now that that's continued to grow, is we are professionalizing that corporate function there. So we brought in a president to oversee all the manufacturing facilities. His name is Doug Simon, great guy, industry veteran, formerly the CEO of Agriport North America. And then we hired a national corporate CFO who's a 15-year veteran of CLA, and also worked in the dairy industry previously. We have a COO and a master cheesemaker on staff. So we're starting to professionalize that piece because it's getting big. And I think one thing that my dad would say about Greco that, no regrets at all, but maybe one thing that we could have done better that looking back now is, maybe bring in some more professional staff to help us continue to grow and get to the next level. So we've done that on the cheese side. And they did that at Greco too. Don't take me wrong. They did have a full corporate department, but we could, I think he would say could always keep adding and always want people smarter than us to be involved, if not running these businesses. So
yeah.
So we do have non-family members, and I think that trend will continue. Although, like I said, one of our goals is always to make sure that we provide opportunities to G3, to G4, eventually to G5. So it's kind of like the balance of all of it. So.
No, and that's what I was curious about by asking that question, because I could appreciate that as you're building this family legacy and business, it's kind of one of those things where you want to keep it in the family, and it's a little it's a little challenging to kind of give the baby up to somebody else that may not have the last name or have any ties to the family.
Yeah.
And so I'm actually curious to understand that a little bit more, where how do you kind of say, all right, this is somebody that we want to hire, they're not a family member, are you looking for alignment of values and kind of that personal touch where this is somebody that you can have at the family, around the family, and how does that look in terms of making those decisions of hiring outside family members?
Yeah, great question. I would say, to your point, the biggest thing for us is cultural fit, and obviously, we're looking for people that are industry, that are, I wouldn't say, I don't know if industry titans the right word, but industry veterans or industry members that can help us in ways that that we don't know. Like before, Cheese Merchants is a hard Italian cheese processing company, so Cheese Merchants doesn't make cheese, we process it. So when we started vertically integrating that platform, taking milk and making cheese is a totally different process. So we realized, hey, we need to put players on the bench. My uncle, who's our CEO of our whole dairy platform, was like, hey, we need to get players on the bench that understand that process, that understand the chemistry of it. And so that's when we retained Steve Beagle as our master cheesemaker. He's one of, I think, 40 master cheesemakers in the hard Italian cheese category in this country. We brought him in. He's a partner in one of our plants, our wheel plant. And so I would say we're looking for people like that can help us continue to get to the next level. But to answer your question, cultural fit is the most important. So, we try not to bring in, and again, you can't always smoke this out in an interview, right? But we bring people in that care more about the success of the organization than their own personal success. We want people to come in here that aren't I guys or gals or that are, taking credit. We don't accept that, because it just, in our opinion, for right or for better or worse, we feel that's a weakness in an organization, and it will only lead to, degradation of your business and not an improvement. So we look for people that care more about the success of the organization as a collective group than their individual success or taking credit for certain things. And that's how we've built all of these companies. And it's, it's like the Wooden philosophy. We talk about a lot of his quotes all the time, and it's a team. It takes 10 hands to make a basket, right? And so that's really, cultural is most important. And work ethic too, right? I mean, we lead by example, so we expect, and listen, some people, not to say that working smarter, we always trying to work smarter. Hard work to us means a lot of things, dedication to the business, making prudent hires, making good, sound financial investments. It's not just about, how many hours did you come in, although that was a big part of our success was just that compounding of time over years, and what Greco became, and then ultimately what spun off of Greco, which was one of the largest cheese conglomerates in this country, and a very, very large commercial real estate portfolio. So yeah, I have a bad habit of blabbering, but
No, that's incredible. And so I was curious too to understand, like, what is kind of that duration of decision making look? Are you taking your time when you're evaluating these individuals, or is it a pretty streamlined process, and once you kind of feel good, to kind of just, keep the process moving? I'm curious to understand, how long does it take?
Yeah. For key roles, it'll take a little longer, because we'll really, they'll typically interview with at least 4 family members, and then other executives and whatever investment sleeve that is. So with key roles, we really try to be diligent about it and make sure that, we're not, we obviously, you don't want turnover at those roles, right? So I would say it's very diligent. Everyone that's in a key role will meet with several family members, and then we'll kind of all sit down and say, hey, what do you guys think, right? So we try to be diligent about it, but as you know, in an interview, you can never. It's hard. You could smoke it out to an extent, but it's hard to smoke out culture and work ethic in an interview. It's always kind of we always joke about it. My dad, my uncle, and my uncles and I. It's always, that's a bit of a crapshoot, but you hope that your judgment and your gut is mostly right, and then you take a chance, right? So no one bats 1,000 there, and we're no exception to that. So
Yeah. And so this is a question that came to my mind just now that I'm curious about. Younger guy like you, being the third generation, you've seen what has been accomplished from prior generations. Somebody in your shoes, how do you battle with, staying in the family business, but also having your own personal aspirations to say, wow, if they could do this, like, what can I do on my own, or what can I build? Like, is there ever kind of an internal battle with that?
not for me. I'm like beyond proud of everything my grandparents, my dad, my uncles, and my aunt, and everything that the first 2 generations built, and the foundation that they laid. And again, I kind of look at it, to me, I don't know. I just feel like nothing of, I think Tom Brady said in his speech last week, like, nothing of significance was ever accomplished by a single individual.
Mm.
And so I kind of look at it as like, what I would love the third generation's legacy to be would be that we kept adding bricks, and we kept making the fortress stronger, and we kept everyone, and we paid it forward. And we gave it to the 4th generation ideally bigger and better and more secure than what Generation 3 received. So that's kind of our goals, I would say. And we don't really talk about personal stuff too much. We try to keep it as a group, and I think that's really important. So
yeah, no, I think that great answer, Pat. Also, just didn't want to chip you up there, but curious, because you see that sometimes. But I think the point that you made earlier is really that appreciation and that love and the family dynamic. So it speaks to just the strength that you guys have. And so, what's the current focus today? How do you see the future of the family? It sounds like cheese merchants is a big component of that. Just curious to understand kind of where you guys headed from here.
Yeah, good question. I think we'll continue to, our two, I think, biggest avenues for growth will be our cheese manufacturing platform, cheese merchants, and all of the bespoke manufacturing facilities that are connected to that company, and commercial real estate. And we have our securities investments, and they're diverse, and we need those, and it's a good, and we want to have that. But I would say where we'll continue to reinvest while we have, we just have such a great runway with the cheese merchants platform. So I think we'll continue to vertically and horizontally integrate that business. And I think we'll continue to do real estate development, ground up developments and acquisitions, which we have 3 projects going on right now, totaling easily over 1.5 million square feet across all 3 of those projects. So retail, mixed use, industrial. So I would say we're going to continue to invest in those asset classes because they've, food operating companies and real estate have really gotten us to this point, I would say. And so we'll continue to do that. And, I'm sure this office will evolve over time. It's hard to say where it could go, but hopefully it just keeps improving and we keep making the pie bigger.
Yeah. And so I do want to pivot here a little bit to our family office Fire 5 round, where I just have, same set questions that I ask all guests. The first one here is, what is a common misconception about your field of expertise that you'd like to debunk?
That's a good question. Our field of expertise. I think maybe one thing that I would say that I've heard a lot of is, family members maybe not being as intricately involved in some of these assets. And, we've had a lot of success to the contrary. And I think, again, it's one of our kind of missions. So it's again, more times than not, from what I've heard, that most people don't do that. And they've been very successful too. But I would say for us, that's kind of a big part of what we do. And again, like I said earlier, that it's not always the easiest, obviously, but I think it's important to our patriarchs. And so, we try to be smart about it, where, no one's stepping on someone else's toes, and kind of give everyone a different department to be a part of. And so, and everyone, and ideally, the leaders at the top will always, portray the right messaging and the perspective that everyone else needs to have. So I would say, I think a lot of people think that having too much family involved in operating companies and family assets is maybe not good, but we've had a lot of success with it. And again, like I said earlier, it's been a big part of, I think, our family members' growth is learning those valuable lessons on the business side from our patriarchs and founders and leaders. So.
Yeah, no, that was great. What's the most memorable or unusual experience you had throughout your journey?
Man, these are tough questions.
If you need to think about that, we can.
I would say probably the biggest one. I would say probably the most memorable for me was probably being a part of the Greco roll up and the ultimate transaction with Cisco, because We sold that business, in 2021. There was still a lot of uncertainty. You're still in that COVID kind of era, and a lot of the food service segments were still getting hit pretty hard. And so there was just a lot of uncertainty, and it was a lot of work, right? Working through, that really disrupted our industry, obviously. But it was at the same time one of those industries that was essential. So we were all working, right? We were all in the office, we were all working. In fact, that summer of 2021, when labor got really tight because of all the stimulus and some of the unemployment packages that were available, there would be a lot of times where, we were on the floor at like 5 a.m. on a pallet jack loading trucks. And then like 2 hours later, we would be like on a board call, or we'd be on a deal call with like the Cisco representatives. And it was a very memorable time. And it was just a very proud moment, I would say, for my dad and my grandfather and my uncles and all of us to say, in just over 30 years, it went from a startup to, being one of, Cisco is the largest food service distributor in the world. And Greco at the time, I think, was one of their largest acquisitions. So to kind of see all that and understand the significance of it, that was pretty special, I would say.
No, that's great. And so what's one piece of advice you would give to somebody just starting their career in the family office space? And that can be, kind of like yourself, a family member that pivoted, back into the family, or just, a non-family member.
Yeah. I would say like one thing that I always like to do is just continue to learn, and there's so many different parts to a family office: tax, governance, the asset classes that you own and operate, family stuff. And I think one thing is like just always continuing, like, try to understand how fixed income and the bond yields work. Try to understand, tax loss harvesting. Try to understand, leasing and cap rates on the real estate side. Try to understand the pain points and pressures and if you have operating companies, and just trying to always learn more and understand as much as you can, so that that you could better, you can add value and ideally, step in and help in certain areas or make a big difference in certain areas. And it's a lot to learn, but I think if you don't shy away from things and you have that curious mind and have some industriousness and try to keep growing, I think that serves you well, because you're always going to rely on outside consultants in these offices, right? They're small and lean, and it doesn't make sense to have all that payroll. So I think if you can learn as many different areas that your office touches, it will, I think, serve you well.
Yeah. So I know you kind of mentioned this earlier, but just, to point it out again, what are some of your personal core values, for you and your family?
Yeah, good question. I would say for sure is family and love, right? My grandpa would tell you that, if they would have never stuck together when they were in that era of the 60s, and when him and his brothers were working and his mother was working, and it was just them four. They had, again, no resources, no education, and they would all put their checks into a pot, and no one was selfish, and they stuck together, and because of that, now we are where we are. And so I think that family togetherness and that love is for sure the most important to our family. And then the work ethic, which again, like we talked about, means a lot of things. It doesn't mean, working 15 hours a day necessarily.
Right.
And so I would say that, and I think a big thing for us too is, just being a team player and not putting your own interests or your own accolades above the others, and just being content to be a part of a group that's all trying to make each other better and the group better. I think that's important to us, because as the family grows, if we can keep that message going and really instill it into the next generations, I think we can keep this thing going. And I think if we don't do that, then it could be a matter of time before a couple bad apples could upset this thing. No different than, what happened to some other big families that we don't have to name by name. And so I think that's really important to us, those values, and it's gotten us to where we are today. So if it's not broke.
Yeah, no, really valuable. And the last question here, and I think just thinking about what you said earlier about kind of getting that, just sample understanding from some other successful families, understanding the landscape within the family office space. Where do you see the family office space headed over the next 5 years?
That's a good question. For me being, I think I've been here 4 years now, and I'm young, and so I'm green, and so I don't have a ton of, prior knowledge. But I think just if you look at the baby boomer generation, especially since COVID, and maybe expediting a lack of a succession plan and having more liquidity events, I think there's just going to be a lot more family offices, right? I think people will continue to, I think these, once the debt markets start to cooperate again, and I think the Fed, the Fed kind of works through this inflation stuff and rates are more normalized. I think there'll just be more M&A and of small and mid cap businesses and more family offices, and so I could see that happening. As far as how the whole, it's such a variable space, and for me being so young, it'd be hard for me to opine too much on that. But I definitely see, I think there'll definitely be more and more, obviously, as the next couple of decades play out. So
yeah, no, you're spot on. I can agree with that as well. Well, Pat, this was great. Really appreciate your time, and learned a ton myself, and as I know the audience will as well. So just want to really thank you for your time and appreciate it.
No, thank you for having me, Lenny. It was a lot of fun, and look forward to hearing more of your guests, and hopefully people can take a couple nuggets out of this and help them in some way. So
definitely.